Welcome back to the deep dive. We're all about turning big ideas, these really profound strategies, into something you can actually use, like tomorrow. We try to get past just talking about things and really drill down into how stuff works operationally.
And today, yeah, we're tackling something huge. It's a major hurdle in leadership, honestly. It doesn't matter the field. It's that classic paradox. You have this amazing vision, but then actually doing it.
Right, that execution gap.
Exactly. Every entrepreneur, every executive, they've got the big dream. But bridging that gap between the dream and, the day-to-day grind, the disciplined execution, that's where most initiatives, frankly, they just fizzle out.
Yeah, vision without action is just a dream, like they say. And our sources today, they offer this incredibly detailed model for implementation. We're calling it the prophetic implementation model. We're looking at how Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, approached this massive strategic challenge, turning divine revelation, this huge vision, into a real, working, growing global community, the Ummah. And just to be clear, we're not looking at theology here. We're focused purely on extracting the management playbook.
Yeah.
How do you scale a mission from literally zero to global?
And structuring that complexity is, well, it's everything. What the sources really bring out, and what we want you listening to really grab onto is this. The difference between just being a dreamer and being a true leader. It's not about how big your ambition is. It's about mastering disciplined execution. The Prophet's mission gives us this blueprint for structured growth that actually lasts. It's durable.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear then. We want to get past the buzzwords, the general leadership talk, and really uncover the specific steps, the granular methods that made that mission work, and then translate that wisdom, that historical know-how, into really clear, practical frameworks, these 30-day, 90-day, one-year action plans that you can basically lift and shift into whatever you're working on, professionally or personally, right now.
All right, let's unpack this core model. When you look at the timeline, the strategy isn't like, boom, immediate global expansion. Not at all. It's revelation, yes, but combined with this very specific, very step-by-step, deliberate implementation strategy. The focus wasn't so much on just getting big numbers quickly, but more on how the vision was woven into the fabric, the DNA of the community.
That deliberate structuring of time, of resources, that's exactly why this model is so insightful for today. The Prophet's approach, you can really break it down into maybe 4 key strategic steps. And the sources stress they have to happen in order. Okay, step 1. This shows an incredible understanding of how you launch something big. It's starting small and growing gradually.
Exactly. The mission didn't kick off with some big public announcement or marketing campaign, no. That very early phase was all about secret dawah, the private invitation. And this wasn't just about hiding for safety's sake, it was strategic. It was creating a controlled space for incubation, for really high-stakes vetting of the first people involved. You can't launch something world-changing with a team you haven't tested, right?
So if you compare that to, say, the startup world today, it's like that pre-seed stage. You're testing your core idea with a very small, trusted group before you go looking for big investment or make a public splash. But how did they test them? How did they test this battle-tested beta product, as the sources called the early converts?
Well, they tested things like resilience, loyalty, especially under intense pressure, social pressure, psychological pressure. Keeping the numbers small meant high-touch, personalized guidance. But the secrecy itself, that was a kind of test. If someone couldn't keep confidentiality, especially when facing persecution, it showed they maybe lacked the character needed for the long haul. So this incubation phase, it built incredible internal trust. Resilience, things that rapid public growth just wouldn't have allowed. It really proves you've got to build that internal strength first, the character, the commitment of your core team, before you even think about expanding outwards. Scaling too soon? Well, it's almost a guarantee of failure.
That idea of structural integrity, it leads perfectly into step 2, doesn't it? Which is strengthening foundations before scaling. During that Meccan period, what was the absolute core focus of that internal growth?
The strategy was laser-focused. Absolutely relentless on the fundamentals. First, comprehensive teaching of the Quran. And second, the rigorous, daily work of building individual character tarbiyah. This was the quality control. They weren't worrying about marketing yet or geopolitics. The whole effort was making sure that first group, that first cohort, truly embodied the values completely.
Okay, so if we think about values in a company today, like integrity or transparency or maybe innovation, how did they make sure those values were genuinely lived, deeply ingrained? Not just posters on a wall. How was that systematized?
Well, the training was intense. It was multi-layered. Constant, required recitation and memorization of the revelations, that was like the living mission statement, constantly reinforced. But Crucially, it had to translate immediately into behavior, into conduct, you could see. So if someone showed punctuality or honesty or compassion, it wasn't just nice, it was the expectation. And if someone slipped up, it was addressed immediately, often privately. This built a culture where living the values was the main KPI, you could say. It ensured the community was the message before they tried to scale the message outwards. Because if that foundational character isn't solid, any quick expansion just creates this fragile thing that shatters under pressure, usually through, corruption or some internal ethical meltdown.
And that intense focus on structure, character, mission, take, it all kind of fizzily came together in step 3.
Right.
Institutionalizing values. The classic example here is setting up the Masjid Mawi, the Prophet's Mosque, in Medina.
Right. Moving to Medina was the shift from being a movement to becoming essentially a state. And the Masjid Nabawi was the engine room for that. Our sources really highlight it was way more than just a prayer space. It was the institutional heart that made the values operational. It was, all at once, the place for governance, making laws. It was the court for resolving disputes. It was the university for ongoing learning. It was the command center for defense. And it was the hub for distributing social welfare.
Well, so if a modern leader was setting up a new HQ or a community center using this model, they wouldn't just build a fancy building. They'd design it, operate it so that the very way it functions reinforces things like governance, learning, justice.
Precisely. It institutionalized the system of action, like managing resources for the poor that happen transparently through the masjid. That reinforces social justice. Diplomatic meetings, court rulings, they happen there, making justice visible, central. It gave them a single central operating system where basically every action reinforced those core values they'd built up in step 2.
Okay, so once that foundation was solid, the core values were lived, the institutional hub was up and running. Then came step 4, scaling with systems. Moving from that tight-knit local group to a governing body ready for regional growth.
This is where governance gets formalized. Scaling wasn't just allowed to happen organically or chaotically, it was managed. Managed through strategic alliances, treaties, and really quite complex governance structures like the famous Constitution of Medina. This document, it wasn't just a suggestion. It was a formal legal and social contract. It structured the relationships between all the different groups, Muslims, Jewish tribes, others, defined everyone's rights, everyone's obligations, mutual responsibilities.
So it's like the modern equivalent of hammering out a massive detailed partnership agreement or maybe the first comprehensive set of bylaws for a growing company that's getting complex.
Exactly that. Growth wasn't just based on who you knew or who was nearby, it was controlled. Formalized systems, legal documents. That's the strategic difference, isn't it? Between a movement that explodes and then maybe burns out and an enduring state or organization. Structured scale protects your values with systems, with laws, with procedures as you grow. It prevents that implosion that you often see with rapid, unstructured growth.
And I guess the big takeaway from this whole historical model is, well, it seems like every massive achievement, no matter how huge it ends up, it always starts with one small, consistent, structured step. You just can't shortcut that tough, rigorous work of incubation and building the foundation. That idea, that need for consistency, for structured small steps, it leads us right into the practical side for anyone listening today. If the prophetic model relies on these small, structured moves, how do we translate that into a modern 30-day plan? This first phase kind of mirrors that early secret Dawa period, doesn't it?
Right.
It's heavily focused on you, personally. Personal accountability, building habits. It's like a personal reboot.
Yeah, the 30-day plan is absolutely your internal groundwork project. If you're leading a team, this is the phase where you and maybe your core people, you ruthlessly audit yourselves. Improve personal reliability. That's the focus.
Okay, so what absolutely has to be prioritized in this first critical month? Our sources point to 2 specific things. Daily, non-negotiable actions. First, that daily spiritual connection specifically, connecting with the Quran daily. And second, weaving small, consistent acts of service into your routine.
Let's talk about the strategic value there, even in a business context. Why is that daily Quran connection framed as continuous alignment with the ultimate vision? Well, think about it. In today's chaotic world, your goals can drift so fast. Reading or reflecting on your core text, your ultimate mission statement every day. It acts like a critical mission audit. Stop scope creep. It forces you to ask, okay, is what I'm busy with today actually serving the big long-term purpose? Or have I gotten lost in urgent but unimportant stuff?
Okay. Mission audit. I like that. And the small acts of service, like helping out a colleague without being asked or doing some small kindness outside of work. How do those work strategically in the first 30 days?
They build what you might call moral muscle, the capacity needed for bigger sacrifices, greater accountability later on. See, selfless action is the direct opposite of self-interest or organizational corruption. By making a small act of service mandatory daily, you start embedding the value that maybe your existence or your organization's existence is ultimately for others' benefit, not just personal gain. It makes sure your habits immediately mirror your stated values, makes you more reliable.
And this leads right into the core foundational habits we need to nail in this 30-day sprint. We're talking beyond just being nice. We're talking measurable stuff. Strict honesty, absolute punctuality, and setting up actual reflection circles.
Yeah, these aren't just nice to haves. They're the non-negotiable baseline for being trustworthy. Take punctuality. It's like the lowest bar for trust, isn't it? If a leader or a team member can't even show up on time consistently, how can you trust them with high-stakes deadlines? Complex projects, it gives you a concrete way to measure personal reliability.
And those reflection circles, how do we make those more than just a casual coffee chat? How do you operationalize that?
They need structure, like structured debriefs, mirroring how that early community constantly emphasized self-evaluation. Maybe it's weekly, maybe bi-weekly. A set time where individuals or small groups review how they did successes and failures on those core habits: punctuality, honesty, service. And ideally, with an accountability partner or group, it's an immediate, low-stakes way to self-correct. By making self-evaluation formal, expected right in the first month, you institutionalize the habit of critical thinking. And that's vital for organizational health down the line.
It really is about establishing that baseline trustworthiness. You have to trust the individual parts of the people to handle the small things perfectly before you throw huge resources at the big things.
And if you're leading people, this translates directly. That 30-day focus becomes an early strategic way to build confidence within your team.
Okay, let's dig into that practical leadership angle a bit more.
Right. In that first month, your job as a leader is to assign simple, very achievable tasks. Tasks that let the team get quick, reliable wins, executed well, on time. This creates a kind of success spiral. Momentum builds through proven competence. If you throw a massive, complex, high-risk project at a new team or an organization that's changing, right away, you risk immediate burnout, people getting disillusioned, failure, and that can take months to recover from. The prophetic strategy was always incremental. Build capability and trust first, then ramp up the complexity.
Okay, so if the 30-day plan was all inward-looking, fixing personal habits, building that internal confidence, the 90-day plan feels like the crucial turning point. This is where you start scaling outwards, right? Strengthening networks, moving from just self-improvement to making a visible impact in the community. It mirrors that early growth phase in Medina.
Exactly. This shift is vital if you want growth that lasts. We're moving from proving individual reliability to initiating organizational impact. The focus broadens. It goes from just personal acts to structured community projects. This is where you actually launch tangible things, maybe educational programs, structured welfare initiatives, or building teams that work across different departments or functions.
So it's the difference between, say, doing one small random act of kindness, that's the 30-day plan, and launching a structured food bank drive that needs coordination, teamwork, budgeting, logistics. That's the 90-day plan. It tests the competence you built in month one.
And needing that coordination points directly to the next piece: strengthening networks. There's that strong historical parallel, again, the alliances the Prophet built in Medina. The 90-day plan requires you to actively build connections outside your immediate circle, outside your core team. This means systematically finding and formalizing collaborations. External partners, other departments, maybe setting up formal mentoring programs, accountability partnerships. It's intentional.
How does a leader do that strategically, though? Not just casual networking, but really building strong alliances.
You approach it like a partnership, with clear risk assessment and defined mutual benefits and obligations. Just like those Medina alliances had protocols for shared defense or resources, your 90-day alliances need to spell out: what does each party have to contribute? What happens if the agreement isn't met? It's about building interdependence, making sure your expansion is supported externally, diversified, not vulnerable if one relationship fails. You're testing your influence, your capability, but in a controlled way.
And because you're now bringing in more people, more resources, bigger projects, the complexity just skyrockets, which means accountability becomes absolutely critical. You're saying this has to be formally introduced right at the 90-day mark.
Non-negotiable. In this 90-day framework, you must bring in formal feedback systems, rigorous self-evaluation, but tied to actual organizational metrics.
Mm.
This can't be just a casual check-in, it needs to be procedural. You need ways to measure if the expansion is healthy. Are you stretching resources too thin? And crucially, are you starting to compromise the character and values you worked so hard to establish in those first 30 days?
Why is it so critical to implement this now at 90 days? Why not just wait for like a 6-month review or something?
Because entropy, things sliding back, it starts immediately without formal checks, especially under pressure. People naturally revert to old habits, comfortable ways the second the stress of expansion hits. Accountability ensures those small positive steps from the first 30 days actually stick, that they get refined under the stress of scaling up. This feedback loop, and it should be ideally 360-degree feedback, not just top-down, needs to be built in early for sustainable growth. You need to know not just what's working, but exactly where the friction points are, where are ethical lines getting blurred, where are logistical bottlenecks happening in your expanding network. You need to catch those before they become systemic failures.
Okay, the 90-day plan got us executing projects, building networks. Now, we really zoom out. We elevate the discussion to legacy, to sustainability with the one-year plan. This is where the focus shifts dramatically, isn't it? Moving beyond just short-term projects and individual habits towards building lasting institutional impact and really deep mission alignment.
Exactly. The ultimate yardstick for this whole model is impact that endures. So the main goal of the one-year roadmap is to build structures, processes, systems, things that will outlive the current leaders, outlast short-term fads or economic downturns. You're moving from just doing projects to establishing functioning institutions.
Which means you have to constantly make sure everything you're doing actually serves the larger mission. It can be tough when organizations get bigger, when bureaucracy creeps in. You can't just be busy. You have to be busy doing the right things. Things that serve that grand vision, which for the prophetic model included things like justice, education, social empowerment.
And keeping that alignment takes constant vigilance. It really does. If you're running a company or an organization today, your one-year goal has to ensure that every major initiative, every significant chunk of work serves your defined higher purpose. Whatever that is, innovation, social equity, environmental sustainability. You have to systematically audit your activities and be willing to eliminate work, even if it's profitable in the short term, if it's disconnected from that founding mission, that disconnect. That's how once great organizations slowly become irrelevant or hypocritical.
So after building habits, executing projects, creating these early structures,
Mhm.
you then need to institutionalize the review process itself.
Mm.
Our sources really stress this. The necessary annual practice of reviewing everything and resetting goals for the year ahead.
Yeah, this annual review, it's directly inspired by that constant sense of accountability the prophet maintained before God. It's not just a good business practice in this model, it's framed as a mandatory system, a system for critical humility. The sources emphasize that human efforts, even when guided by high ideals, are always prone to error, to ethical drift.
That phrase, necessary humility, that really stands out. In a modern context, what does that critical assessment, that kind of moral audit actually involve? What should leaders be looking for?
It means looking unflinchingly at the failures. The missed targets, yes, but also the missed opportunities, and specifically looking at the ethical compromises that might have been made over the past year and doing it transparently. For a modern organization, this moral audit has to ask tough questions. Were our resource decisions fair? Did we uphold justice for all our stakeholders, employees, customers, the community? Did scaling fast force us to cut corners on those character standards we set back in the 30-day plan?
So it's not just checking the financial numbers, it's a values audit, checking procedural integrity against your core principles.
Absolutely. And the audit has to lead to action, not just pointing fingers. It's about having an organizational error correction protocol. For instance, if the review finds that, say, lack of punctuality consistently caused project delays and friction, you don't just note it. You formally implement new systems, maybe stricter protocols, to address that specific character flaw at an organizational level. This annual review becomes the vital institutionalized reset button. It ensures the mission stays true to the values it started with, rather than just chasing the next quarterly target. It's like institutionalizing TOP, that concept of constantly turning back, correcting course, returning to the core path.
Okay, this is the crucial connection point, the so what bridge. We've detailed this incredibly structured, gradual historical model. How does this ancient strategy apply directly to the chaos and challenges of today's business world, the tech landscape, especially with the complexity AI is throwing at us?
Well, the historical parallel is actually incredibly relevant because modern business, especially in tech, often perfectly demonstrates the failure the prophetic model warns against. Our sources point to a recurring pattern. Today's leaders are often obsessed with speed and scale above everything else, above structure, above character. They chase hypergrowth, immediate viral success, without first making sure those deep ethical foundations, that character piece, are solidly in place.
So they're essentially skipping step 2, the character building, and maybe step 3, the institutionalizing of values, and trying to leap straight to step 4, global scale.
Precisely. They try to build this massive presence before they've established robust mechanisms for accountability or before the individuals involved have the proven character to handle that scale ethically. And the result we see again and again: fragile expansion, big organizational ethical crises, catastrophic failures in reputation, because the character foundation just wasn't strong enough to support the weight of the growth.
Okay, but let me push back a little here. In today's market, first mover advantage, exponential growth, these are heavily rewarded, right? How can a modern company realistically afford to adopt a strategy that basically says, hang on, slow down, vet your people meticulously, build character for years before you scale publicly? Isn't that commercial suicide?
That's the critical tension, isn't it? But the prophetic model isn't saying don't scale, it's saying scale sustainably. Prophetic wisdom insists on growth that is values-driven and therefore sustainable. Longevity, endurance, that's the ultimate ROI in this model. A company that prioritizes character first, it arguably builds higher loyalty, faces less internal corruption or fraud, and shows greater resilience when markets inevitably turn rough.
The question becomes, do you want fragile, explosive growth that might just burst, or do you want an enduring institution that could potentially last for generations? Sustainable growth is presented as the solution, contrasting sharply with those often fragile, hypergrowth models we see celebrated, especially maybe in the tech world. And looking at the biggest challenge right now, arguably, it's the crazy speed of tech evolution, deploying powerful tools like AI. How does this ancient character-first wisdom guide us now in the age of algorithms?
This is where it becomes incredibly pertinent. The AI era imperative through this lens is about combining structure with sincerity. Technology itself, AI included, it's morally neutral, right? It's a tool. It just amplifies the intent of the person or system using it. So if the user's foundation is purely speed and profit, well, the AI will simply accelerate exploitation, maybe reinforce biases, misuse data.
So that deep character building from the 30-day plan, that focus on honesty, service, justice, that acts like the ethical firewall, the guardrails against technology's potential downsides.
Exactly. The sources suggest that having deep structure, that operational 3 and 9 1-year framework combined with sincerity, which is that internal tested commitment to values like justice and truth, that combination ensures technology is deliberately used to uplift people rather than exploit them through opaque algorithms or data harvesting. For example, that institutionalized annual review, the 1-year plan's moral audit, that would mandate a thorough review of algorithmic bias, ensuring any AI deployment aligns with the established value of justice, even if it slightly impacts short-term profit.
That makes the wisdom really operational. If your core foundation is rooted in tested character, your AI projects are naturally steered towards more equitable outcomes. But if leadership skips that character phase, the sheer speed of their tools will massively outrun their ethical capacity. A collision seems almost inevitable.
The value structure becomes the essential constraint needed to manage exponential technological power responsibly. Leaders who bypass that foundational character work while simultaneously embracing algorithmic speed are, arguably, building systems they fundamentally cannot control ethically. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, that was an incredibly structured look at strategy. Let's try to wrap this up with some clear takeaways for you, the listener, focusing on how to actually put this into practice starting today.
Yeah, the core message, really, from this prophetic implementation model is simple but profound. Vision only becomes reality through hard work. Disciplined, rigorous, step-by-step action. The historical example shows us gradual growth, deep foundations built on character and values, and ultimately sustainable systems, institutions designed to last.
And the clear call to action for leaders today is stop just relying on good intentions. You need to actually implement structured plans. That 30-day, 90-day, 365-day framework, real success, especially now in the AI age, demands constant alignment. Making sure your daily actions, those small habits, acts of service, moments of connection, are structurally linked back to your bigger, enduring mission.
So we want to leave you with a direct challenge, some specific, actionable steps you can take literally right now based on the framework we've just walked through.
Okay, first, structure your personal 30-day plan. Keep it focused. Three things. One spiritual or mission alignment goal, like that daily mission audit. One personal habit directly tied to trust, like absolute punctuality. And one small, deliberate act of service every day. Focus inward. Aim for perfect execution.
Second, for the 90-day goals, expand your view. Shift focus to a community project or a team-based initiative that requires collaborating with others outside your usual bubble. And crucially, within the first week of this 90-day phase, set up a formal, documented feedback system. Build structured accountability into your network early.
Third, start drafting your one-year roadmap. Think bigger picture. How will these expanded actions move beyond just being temporary projects? How will they become enduring structures or systems? And define exactly how they serve the larger mission and how they could keep functioning even if you weren't there.
And finally, maybe a provocative thought to chew on, building on that idea of institutionalized character. If the prophet's implementation model demanded this necessary humility before the divine, what structure do you actually have in place? A structure that guarantees your own failures, your own ethical blind spots or compromises will be surfaced, audited, and corrected, not just swept under the rug for the sake of profit or ego or speed. Because maybe the ability to institutionally own failure, maybe that is the ultimate engine for truly enduring growth.